back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Wednesday afternoon. Recording a little bit later this week. Just had a busy few days, and we'll talk about one of the reasons is a little bit busier later on in the show. But a lot to get into on today's episode. We are going to give our final thoughts from Georgia's win at Auburn over the weekend. We're going to look ahead to Georgia Ole Miss, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, give our initial thoughts and share what Kirby Smart and players had to say in preparation for this big game back between the hedges. We're going to talk about a notable recruiting loss for Georgia over the weekend. Beat Auburn, but Auburn got a little bit of revenge a few days later. Talk a good bit about the coaching carousel, do our coaching carousel check-in because, boys, the biggest job yet this cycle came open, so we'll do our best to try to fill that. Then we'll finish this thing off with some UGA hoops talk. Georgia men's basketball minute. Had a chance to talk to Mike White and players in Birmingham as part of SEC tip-off. But guys, let's get this thing started with some final thoughts on Georgia 20-10 over Auburn. Had a chance to rewatch it over the weekend and wrote about that on Tuesday. Got some things that stood out to me and what getting a chance to reflect and work back through that game, stuff that especially in the moment, and especially as Ben can attest to, where we were, it was really hard to see some of the replays and things like that. So this was a game that was really valuable, I thought, to go back and rewatch. And I'll start with you, Ben. What has sort of stuck with you from the win on Saturday? What's still sort of on your mind from that game?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a ton different from what we talked about after the game, but I just think the conundrum that is Georgia defensively on the first few possessions of a game versus what is Georgia in the second half of a game right now. Like, you're not seeing a more stark difference probably across college football in terms of what you're getting from the exact same unit in those different portions of the game. I don't want to say this is what I think is going to happen this weekend against Ole Miss necessarily, but I'm curious what this Georgia team looks like when it gets in at one of these Power Four games defensively, what it's gotten in the second half of all of these games. If it just gets that for a full 60 minutes, which you would think would happen at some point this season, just how dominant I think that this Georgia team still has the opportunity to be. I think it is a very complimentary football team. I don't think that it's going to be blowing many teams out on the scoreboard just because of the way that it plays. But I think that it is, if it gets more consistent play defensively in the first quarter and a half of games, I think that you're going to see Georgia playing a lot more comfortably down the back half of the season than maybe I would have guessed. That might be a little presumptuous. We might be having a fully different conversation this time next week because you've got a really, really good top 5 opponent coming to town. But I actually came away from that game fairly optimistic about how I view this Georgia team moving forward.
Well, my thing, and I talked to some of the other writers on Monday, I'm kind of having flashbacks. If you guys remember in 2023, that Georgia defense, it was like 6 or 7 games in a row where they gave up a touchdown on the opening drive. But, really, other than that, they played really well on defense and settled in. So I don't know if it's just a repeat of that. And I did write this in my rewatch where, some of the credit is due to Auburn, especially that offense. That RPO offense, you're trying to make the defense wrong no matter what they do. And I think that, I don't want to just totally discredit that this is an issue, but I did put a little bit there, Ben, on, that's what the Auburn offense is meant to do.
Well, and we've seen this season that to beat this, outside of a couple of moments in the Tennessee game, I would say, you've seen that the way to beat this Georgia defense is to have 12, 13, 14 play drives. Like all of these drives that are causing Georgia problems where these teams are keeping Georgia on the field on third down and Georgia can't get off the field on third down, all are turning into, Alabama has a 14-play touchdown drive. Alabama has another 14-play touchdown drive. Auburn opens up with a 14-play touchdown drive, then follows it up with a 12-play field goal drive. You can look at that a couple of different ways. You can't get off the field on third down. You're really frustrated about it. You're also making teams work really, really hard, and they have to be really consistent and really precise in their opening drive to be able to get down the field methodically and score. The only team that I think has deviated from that was Tennessee. They really made it look as easy as you could on the opening possession against Georgia and then hit them with two big explosive, more on the fluky side of plays. Outside of that in the Tennessee game, you have to work really, really hard to manufacture points against this Georgia defense, especially getting the end zone against this Georgia defense. And I don't think that there is better evidence of that than that play on the goal line, where even when you are doing that and you've done it consistently in the first half, you still have to get every single centimeter to be able to actually score touchdowns on this Georgia defense. And I think that that's still the case, even though there have been some signs of this Georgia defense not being as perfect as it's been in the past. I still think there are plenty of indicators that it has the ability to be that as well.
Kip,
Minus
what is
which we've talked about it plenty, so I don't really have to get into all that.
Kip? What has stuck with you from Saturday's game?
Well, just again, we talk about the early starts, but if you take a closer look at it, after the first two possessions, what does Auburn? I mean, what do they do the rest of the game? I think it boils down to Georgia's inability to sustain offensive drives early. I mean, Kirby even said that teams look at Georgia's defense; they know what it brings to the table, which I think is kind of a kind of a damning statement when you really think about it. He kind of made it sound like, his defense was predictable. And I would think you want to be as unpredictable as possible on both sides. But at the same time, we know we have multiple years of watching Georgia to know that they're as good as anyone, maybe the best in college football at adjustments. So what gives your defense a chance to adjust to what they see? Your offense being able to stay on the field. And I think, the first drive was like 3 minutes, but then, the second drive's they go 3 and out. And so I think that's the situation where if you want to talk about Georgia playing 4 quarters of football, it does come to that offense being able to actually stay on the field and continue to extend drives. And for more, the biggest thing about that is that offensive line is just continually banged up and new guys coming in. I think that's playing a big role in that, especially on road games. I just think you're bringing new guys into the mix. You're not really gelling there. The guys that you have playing, you got Monroe Freeling winning, O lineman of the week when he just came in and we didn't think he was going to play. None of us did. Kirby basically said a text message got him to play. He talked about his toughness, but at the same time, I think that offensive line is yet to just get the same. 6 units in 6 games. I think that speaks for itself to where they don't have the continuity needed to be that 4-quarter football team, and they also don't have the first round defensive talent to overcome something like that. They have some young guys that are NFL players, but there isn't a guy in this defense where I can guarantee you he's going to be definitely a first rounder in, next year's draft. Maybe CJ Allen tests well. I don't know, but I just don't think you have that surefire guy. And Georgia's had multiple guys like that every year. Maybe KJ Bolden down the line. But I think overall, I just think with the margin for error just, that much thinner, having healthy guys up front is really kind of the difference in Georgia being able to fulfill their potential. We don't really know. They're as close to being 3-3, a field goal by Tennessee if they get in the end zone against Auburn, but they're also a 4th down field goal call away from being 6-0. So which Georgia team is it? I think that is the great conundrum we're being tasked with. And do we get an answer this week? I don't know, but I think it's kind of a.
I think we lost Kip there. Ben, you still got me?
Oh, I thought it was me. I thought it was me for sure.
So we will wait on Kip to come back, and hopefully that will not take too long. I will send him a quick message just to let him know that he has dropped out. I'll say a couple of things real quick, Ben, and then kind of get your thoughts on it. One, I'm glad that Kip mentioned Monroe Freeling and CJ Allen. One, Monroe Freeling, I think a big part of the issue on Saturday with those slow starts was the offensive line. They could not block. Keldrick Falk, we talked about, Kip mentioned there might not be a first rounder on this defense for Georgia. I would bet the house Keldrick Faulk's going to be a first round pick for Auburn, and he was all over Bo Hughley early. He was giving Georgia trouble. Getting Monroe Freeling in there, and Kip mentioned this too. I mean, Kirby was talking like Monroe might not even travel to Auburn, much less be able to play. That was huge. And I wanted your opinion, and maybe you can think of an example better than I could. I thought that was C.J. Allen's best game as a Bulldog. 10 tackles, helped force the fumble, almost had an interception, had a pass breakup. C.J. Allen was all over the field, and Kirby talked about it afterwards that I think it was a hamstring has kind of hindered him this year, and they felt like on Saturday he played as fast as he can play and kind of looked like he was playing more closer to his potential than he has to start the year.
No doubt. I mean, I thought CJ Allen was incredible. I thought CJ Allen was incredible when we watched it live. I thought when I went back and watched the game on the replay, I thought that he was exceptional there as well. When you look at the PFF grades, I think his grade for that Auburn game was the highest defensive grade that any individual player has had for Georgia at any point this season. And Kirby Smart, of course, brings it up from film review that they had as well. Had to have it. I'll also say, because we got Raylan Wilson and Cash Jones yesterday, I don't know how much we were going to talk about that during this one. I did ask Raylan Wilson who we're giving credit to for the punch out. I believe if Georgia wants to say that the ball got out before Jackson Arnold got across the plane of the goal line, you have to say CJ Allen punched it out, because I think that Raylan Wilson was just getting to it too late. Now, I do think what Raylan Wilson did made it so that Auburn wasn't able to recover the football and Georgia was. So that was big as well. But I did just want to say that while we're talking CJ Allen, I have to credit him for the punch out. I saw the video that Georgia had put out about the game reaction or whatever. And post game, Kirby said, who was it, CJ or Raylan? And everyone was like, Raylan. I think it was CJ personally. So
Got Kip back. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that point before your internet so rudely interrupted you?
Jeez. I mean, I thought I was on a good tangent there, but I think overall, like I said, we don't really know which version of Georgia we have right now. I think we'll probably get some answers in that direction as it is, but I also think you did see some flashes as far as the pass rush, and the edge contain gets better every week. They had some success there, but overall, I think that is where, up front is where they have to improve. And I don't know if it's going to be personnel or schematically, but again, we're saying the same thing on a week-to-week basis now. At this point, it's more the trend. It's kind of it is an issue. They have to get more pressure from that group up front, especially with the team we're about to talk about later on the show.
All right. Only other point I wanted to make, I meant to make this point on Saturday night, and if you guys can believe this, I was so flustered I just totally forgot. For me, watching Georgia Auburn and looking at it specifically from the Auburn side, the first half of that game felt like to me when you watch a college basketball game and one team, might be favored by like 20 points. The other team comes out and is just on fire from three. I mean, knocking down shots, hitting shots they don't usually make. And then you go into halftime and that team is up 8. You're just like, you didn't do enough with the momentum you had. And I thought that was kind of the story of that game. The fact that Auburn had its shots, and, as big as the forced fumble was, I think forcing the field goal on the second drive, I wouldn't say it's as big, but that was huge too, holding them to 3 when the Auburn offense had been moving the ball really well.
And when you fail to get your fourth down conversion after you think that they jump off sides and they don't, and then Auburn has their own 4th and 1 or 2 or whatever it was, Auburn didn't execute very well in that moment. So you kind of get away with one there, but you at least created enough chaos to be able to force that stop. But I mean, I think that is one of the biggest moments of the game as well, because if Auburn even gets 3 points there, it's an entirely different game the way it plays out.
All right, I'm going to do something before we move on to Ole Miss. I'm going to put each of y'all on the spot, and all you can do is say yes or no. You can't explain it, can't do anything. Ben, was that a fumble on the goal line?
Yeah.
Kip, was that a fumble on the goal line?
Absolutely.
Yes, I say it was also a fumble. All right,
Homer.
Second one. Yeah, excuse me. Did Kirby Smart call timeout, Ben?
No.
I'm going to say yes, he did, because he put his hands together. Kip, you get to break the tie here. Did Kirby Smart call timeout?
Verbally, no. Visually, absolutely.
I'm taking that as a win for my side. That Kirby.
I'm taking that as a win for my side.
Naturally. All right, going
I would
on.
love to have a conversation about that topic at some point. I don't want to do it right now because people are talking about it so much, but that whole situation just annoys the living hell out of me.
The beautiful thing is it really didn't matter because
it couldn't have mattered less. In fact, you could argue the immediate next play is a blindside block call that could be questionable. That was a quote unquote makeup call because they just let Kirby Smart get away with one that you could argue it didn't require a makeup call. So we don't have to get into all that. My answer was no.
All right, Georgia, Ole Miss, number 9 Georgia hosting number 5 Ole Miss, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. On Thursday at noon, we will have Neil McCready from Rebels 24/7 on. He's going to help us break down this Ole Miss team, but we want to do this a little bit ourselves, looking at Ole Miss. And I wanted to start by playing some of the clips that we heard from Kirby Smart, from some of the players as they get ready for another top 5 opponent. Kirby mentioned this on Wednesday that just feels like Georgia is playing these top matchups practically every week. A lot of the conversation around Ole Miss right now, Trinidad Chambliss, Division II quarterback from Ferris State, comes off the bench when Austin Simmons gets hurt, and he's played really, really well. Kirby was asked about Trinidad and specifically his running ability, which he's a talented passer as well, but he's made a lot of plays with his legs.
Yeah, you said it. He's explosive, right? He's quick, he's fast, he's tough. He's
struggling right now, boys.
Body, great instincts. There's a difference in being a fast. Yeah, you said it. He's explosive, right? He's quick, he's fast, he's tough. He's got great lower body, great instincts. There's a difference in being a fast guy and being a runner. He's patient behind blocks, quick when he needs to be. Some guys can only run perimeter runs well. Some can only run internal well. He runs both. He does a great job in the draw game. He sets up blocks, and he's a good passer. But, they should get the greatest award there is for finding this guy and having the department within. I don't know who scouted it, who found him, but he is a really good football player that they went out and got and did a tremendous job.
I'm fascinated, guys, about Georgia's defense going up against Ole Miss's passing game and specifically Trinidad Chambliss. And the thing that's interesting to me, Trinidad's played really well. Ole Miss had a stat that he is the first Ole Miss quarterback since Eli Manning to his first 4 starts. He threw for at least 250 yards. So just think about what that means and what he's capable of. But this is Trinidad's first road start at Ole Miss, as a Ole Miss Rebel, I should say. So, Kip, just what do you think about Chambliss from what you know at this point and, the task that this Georgia defense is going to have to slow him down?
Yeah, he's the Ole Miss's version of Stetson Bennett coming in there and basically replacing an injured quarterback and really not looking back. Once I kind of saw him on the field a couple of drives, the first thought I had was like, I'm not sure if Austin Simmons is getting back in this. I just think that he brings a different dynamic to the game, and you could just tell he had full control. He was, unleashing the Rebels offense and giving them exactly what they needed. So I think that is probably the most intriguing part of this game is that Georgia's going to have to contain him somehow. And like I said before, you're going to have to find ways to get pressure. But I think for what he brings to the table, I'm fascinated by it. And like you said, though, you could tell there's a reason why Kirby's doing the call to action to the crowd to show up like they did, against Alabama, because this is his first SEC road start. So it just makes perfect sense that he wants that to be a factor. That is something that, Georgia can take advantage of. And so I think that's going to be a factor in this game. But, man, you just do not want to give him time because I think that, he is capable of picking Georgia apart.
Yeah, I mean, the onus has got to be on the pass rush to affect him and get to him because he's made big plays. And I thought it was really interesting. Kirby was talking about, how dangerous coaching against Lane Kiffin is and the fact that Lane is so good at adapting pre-snap. And he brought up the point, Kirby mentioned that, they will line up quick and sometimes they go quick. But by lining up quickly, that gives them more time, with the helmet communication now. Coaches can talk to the quarterback up to the 15-second mark on the play clock. So if they line up quickly, that gives Lane or whoever else is in the headset time to kind of communicate with Trinidad, tell them what they're seeing. If they need an audible, if they need a hot route, they've got more opportunity to do that. I thought that was really fascinating that Kirby brought that up. What do you think, Ben, specifically of going against a Lane Kiffin coach quarterback and, one with the skill set that Trinidad has?
I'm a big Trinidad Chambliss guy. I think I want to say it was Cooper Patagna from our 24/7 Sports Scouting team had made a Vernon Adams player comp when he committed to Ole Miss out of the portal. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I knew who Trinidad Chambliss was before he ended up at Ole Miss. But when a guy from Ferris State, who was a lower level All-American, ends up at Ole Miss, it makes you be like, all right, Lane Kiffin knows something here. He figured something out. And I remember that night going down the Trinidad Chambliss high school basketball rabbit hole. And you guys know how much I love high school basketball film and how much, especially at the quarterback position, I think it's an indicator of your ability to do certain things, command things, understand spacing, timing, all of those types of things. Great high school basketball player. I think that you see a lot of that in his game. Like, he is just a savvy, instinctive football player. And it's funny because I didn't know the stat, the 250 yards, first 4 games, first since Eli Manning. I didn't know that, but when you couple that with what he's able to do with his legs, and he does a lot of the Gunnar Stockton stuff, I would say, in that he's not just using his legs to get you a first down, which he does do. He's not just using his legs in designed runs, which he does do. He's not just using his legs to be able to pick up 15, 20 yards, which he does do. He uses his legs to be able to get the ball down the field as well. And I think that you bring up the pass rush thing. The challenge there is not just pass rushing Trinidad Chambliss. The challenge is getting him on the ground, because if you rush the passer and you're not getting him on the ground, and now he's created 7-8 seconds of time to be able to get the ball down the field, then you're in a lot of trouble. And I think that he has the ability to do that more than any quarterback Georgia has seen this season. I think that Jackson Arnold was a good sampler for Georgia to get used to what does a quarterback with wheels do, but different type of game, different type of wheels. And I think Trinidad Chambliss can hurt you down the field more because of what he's able to do with his legs if you're not able to get him on the ground.
The thing I would say, too, with playing Trinidad Chambliss, he hadn't really had an issue with this to this point, but we've seen a lot of dropped interceptions from Georgia, it feels like this year. If you got a chance, you're going to want to make a turnover. You want to steal a possession, because this could be a game that comes down to the absolute wire. Wanted to pull up Kirby Smart talking about the Ole Miss defensive line. I thought that was so key in the Rebels' win over Georgia last year, but they lost a lot of guys from that line, guys that are now in the NFL. This is Kirby's read on this Rebels defensive line.
Really impressive again. I got to watch 4 or 5 offensive games yesterday of Ole Miss and only got through 2 defensive games, and pretty impressive, to be honest with you. They're very disruptive, constantly moving, causing havoc and problems and movement, and disruptive, and they've got a couple of the best inside guys we've seen.
I think when you look at this matchup, and again, we'll have Neil McCready in on Thursday, and he'll give us a better feel for this team. But just looking at the stats and looking for a weakness with this Ole Miss team, I look at their run defense. Their run defense does not stack up quite as well as some of the other areas, even compared to their ability to stop the pass. I think that this is a game where Georgia has to lean on Chauncey Bowens and Nate Frazier. Try to get Dwight Phillips Jr. a little bit more run. We've seen him sporadically. Kipp, that to me, when you talk about a successful day for Georgia, I think they have to attack this Ole Miss defensive line and to take advantage, and try to get the ground game going again.
You nailed it. I mean, they have to exploit that perimeter run and get these defensive linemen with their hands, on their knees if they can, because it's similar to the Alabama matchup where I think Georgia should be able to pick their number running the ball. 220, 230 is completely within the line of thought, and why not? That sounds like a great game plan and one that should work most of the time. I think this defensive line they did lose guys at the draft, but my goodness, Xavier Harris is their top, I think, NFL talent. We might be talking about Trinidad Chambliss as like a top NFL draft pick down the road. But right now, I think this is the guy that, it makes me, I want him for the Falcons in the second round. We're talking 6'7 and a half, 325 pounds, disruptive, havoc plays. And then William Eccles and Cam Franklin, those guys are going to get drafted next year. So all three of those defensive linemen right there, just guys that live in the backfield. So for Georgia, yeah, I think you attack their perimeter. You continue to, no one wants to hear it, but like the screen game should work against these guys. You got Dylan Bell out there blocking his tail off. For Dwight Phillips or Zachariah Branch, you can break a couple on those guys. I think that is where they are susceptible to big plays, and you should use that as an extension of your run game. Keep them on their heels. Like I said earlier, if you can be unpredictable, it just helps out Gunnar Stockton a lot and should allow him, when he does need to stay in the pocket and look downfield, it should give him a little bit of extra time. But I think, Drew Bobo versus these guys is probably the matchup of the game. Can your interior lineman, can Dontrell Glover, Micah Morris help out Drew on some guys that are, like I said, massive, and guys that could probably get some push one-on-one against a guy like Drew Bobo, who great technician, but not the biggest offensive lineman in the world.
Ben, what do you make of this matchup between Georgia's offensive line and the Ole Miss defensive line?
Well, I think in the run game, like if you're looking at some analytics, like the nerd stats around this one, like that's the matchup that if Georgia does what it should do, like that's going to be the reason why. A couple of them now that I'm just taking a look at it, like Ole Miss is 108th in the country in yards before contact. Not a great stat. They're 114th in missed tackle rate. They're interesting one, maybe Gunnar Stockton getting involved in the run game. They're 87th in the country in quarterback designed EPA. Conversely, Georgia's 5th on the other side of that. So when Georgia dials it up for Gunnar Stockton in the run game, good things happen on the scoreboard. I think that's the matchup that if you're Ole Miss, you probably worry a little bit, because Georgia's just coming off of a game where it was playing one of the best run defenses that it's going to face all season long. It's probably going to feel a little bit easier at home week over week for that Georgia offensive line to be able to lean on the run game. And we even saw late in the fourth quarter of that Auburn game that when Georgia was wanting to run the ball and needed to, I thought one of the, not to keep on to Auburn, but I thought one of the weirdly more big moments of the game that kind of gets forgotten about is when you're tucked on your 1 yard line, you do the tush push, you don't get anything out of it. And then you put Josh McCray there, and Josh McCray gets like 12 yards, picks up the first down. It was like the slowest 12 yards I feel like I've ever watched, but picks up a very, very key first down and then extends a drive where they end up going to get the first down. So I think Georgia still last week, even though it wasn't its perfect self like it had been running the football the weeks before it still showed some moments where when it needed yards, it got them. And I think this is a game where you just lean on that run game. Don't ask Gunnar Stockton to do too much, because I don't think he has to. And this Ole Miss pass rush is still a little bit dangerous if you give it too much time. So I don't think you want to give it much opportunity to be able to force fumbles or anything like that in the drop back game.
Wanted to mention a key block on that the Josh McCray run, Monroe Freeling. So he deserves a lot of credit for helping spring Josh there. All right, this is a very interesting part of the conversation, and I'm excited to see what you guys have to say about this Georgia offense. That sort of lacked some of the explosion, at least in the last few weeks, and had to kind of grind it out against Auburn. We're going to play first a clip of Kirby Smart talking about this offense, sort of where it is, followed by a clip from Gunnar Stockton.
I don't know. Like a lot of it revolves around the run game, because our explosive plays, which we've been really good at, 2 to 3 years, outside of last year, we were really good at explosive plays going back, but they came off of play actions. They came off of tempo plays. They even came off of runs prior to, last year. So where do you get explosive plays from? You look and you do track them. You see other people and you say, okay, these players make explosives. They need to touch the ball. And that's what we try to look at, because explosives are the greatest indicator of who wins games, right there with turnovers and the middle eight. We want to be more explosive, obviously. And we played some teams early that played us in a very different way that made it hard to be explosive. We've actually been more explosive against some of the better teams that we've played, because they play you more aggressively, which exposes them to risk. But can't pinpoint or say exactly what's going to allow it. I'm comfortable with who we are, although I want to be more explosive. But being a team that can grind it out, be physical in a day and age when a lot of people don't want to be physical, it makes you different.
Yeah, I think our offense, we never quit. We're resilient, and we did what we had to do to win the ball game. And this team, we never quit. We're hard to put away, and I think that's the best part about our offense.
Guys, how much concern do you have about where the Georgia offense is right now? And I'll just sort of start the conversation and say that I still kind of put where the offense is right now on the state of the offensive line. Now, that's not to say that that's just an excuse, because they're banged up, and odds are they're probably going to stay banged up. But I feel like if they felt a little bit more comfortable with where they are at offensive tackle, I think that you would see a little bit more explosive plays. You would see probably more play action opportunities and the ability to execute them. I mean, what you're asking this offensive line to hold up and to try to allow, time for Gunnar Stockton to make plays. But, on one side, they are finding ways to win games. But, sometimes you flirt with disaster. I mean, sometimes you fall behind, 10 against Alabama and can't find the explosive plays you have to have. So I think right now they're in an okay spot, and I put a lot on the offensive line being hurt, but that's probably not going to get better anytime soon. Maybe the bye week after Ole Miss will help, but other than that, I don't know how much can really change when it comes to creating more explosive plays and being a more explosive offense going forward. Kipp, how much concern do you have about where this Georgia offense finds itself right now?
I mean, if you could tell me they're going to roll out their starting 5 offensive linemen healthy, I would tell you I probably would feel pretty good about it. I think, Kirby's comments are kind of, I want to say funny, because he says we track explosives and when we get those guys the ball more, but it seems to me like each time we see a guy have a breakout game, it's the next game you're not really seeing it. Like London Humphreys, has his big game against Tennessee, but then he has 1 catch for 9 yards against Alabama. Zachariah Branch obviously started off, we're talking about a Marshall team where he exploded, but it's every other week for him. I mean, Marshall, Tennessee, doesn't really do much against Alabama or Kentucky, has a good game against Auburn. So are they going to, showcase him? Really the most consistent guy has been kind of Colby Young, where, had big plays against Tennessee, had big plays against Alabama. He only had a catch for 9 yards against Kentucky, had made big plays against Auburn. He's been the most consistent performer. And then, Chauncey Bowens, his health, that played a role. I mean, he was the last 2 games he was breaking out as an elite running back, and then, gets 4 carries for 5 yards against Auburn. Injuries, whatever, played a role in that. But you started to see like what this offense could be when they got him going. But Nate Frazier came in and did an admirable job. You got a lot more Cash Jones than maybe you expected to get, but it's just we haven't seen it put, like the whole Georgia team in general, we haven't seen them put it all together. Have the same starting 5 offensive linemen, feature your same, go to your wide receivers. You're making plays back-to-back weeks, get those guys, lathered up as well. And then, being able to feed Chauncey Bowens. I think if you do all those things, then you have another freak throw or 2 to Oscar Delp, then this offense can, find its ceiling. But that's still a lot of ifs. And that's kind of where this Georgia team is. Yeah, if we're having to say if this a lot, it's not a great sign.
Yeah, I think it's fair to talk about the receivers and like on one hand, I look at it as like, well, they have a lot of guys they like and they can get a lot of different guys in the mix. I think especially with Zachariah Branch, I would not be shocked if opposing defenses come into a game and just say we're not letting number one beat us, and as a result that helps you open things up. And there's been times, and I think there was some in that Auburn game where they sort of used Zachariah Branch as a decoy, where they said, okay, Georgia said, we're going to put him here, but the ball ain't going there. And, I know at one point they moved him out to the flat. He ran a route out to the flat to the left, and Gunner turns around and throws to the right to Nate Frazier. So there is some value in that. But no, I think the point you made, Kip, is a fair one. Ben, how much concern do you have about where this offense is right now? And if it is, possible for them to find a way to be more explosive going forward?
What was Kirby? He said, hey, I'm comfortable with who we are. I feel like that's it. Like, you got to just be comfortable. Like, Georgia, for the most part, offensively and defensively, kind of is who they are at this point. And, like, I think, is Georgia explosive consistently in the traditional sense? No. But, like, have we seen Zachariah Branch make explosive plays? Yes. Have we seen Colby Young make explosive plays? Yes. Have we seen Dylan Bell make explosive plays? Yes. You could argue, I don't know technically by definition what Noah Thomas did last week and whether it meets the threshold of explosive plays, but I would consider that personally an explosive play. Like, you even look in the run game, Nate Frazier's had explosive plays. Chauncey Bowens has had explosive plays. Dwight Phillips has flirted with a couple that have been really explosive plays. And so all that to say, it's like, we know that Georgia has the guys to be able to manufacture explosive plays because we've seen a lot of different guys do it. Is that where Georgia feels it is at its best? Probably not. Like, if you're the type of team that is successful running the ball, staying ahead of schedule, staying ahead of the chains, if you're taking too many shots down the field just to try and be explosive for the sake of being able to say, hey, hit one or two explosive plays for big touchdowns, your hit rate on that, even if you're good at it, isn't going to be extremely high. And so you are putting yourself behind schedule a little bit offensively. And I think that this is a Georgia offense that needs to be ahead of schedule. Like, I don't think it's going to be too successful in 3rd and 10 situations. Not that there are many offenses that are. And so, if you're taking too many shots down the field, trying to do too much explosively just to force the issue, then you're going away from what I think the identity of this offense is when it's at its best. So I think you just keep doing things the way that you've been doing. And when opportunities present for any of those 7 or 8 guys that I just named to be able to have chances to have explosive plays, we know they're capable of doing it.
I want to mention, too, Chauncey Bowens had been dealing with a calf injury. Kirby mentioned that on Monday. I asked him about it on Wednesday, and he said that Chauncey's fine, that he's practiced all week, so I don't see that being an issue going forward. A reminder, too, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Central Time, Rebels 24/7's Neil McCready will come on and, again, help us preview number 5 Ole Miss, number 9 Georgia. Should be a fun one. Hope you guys will tune into that live or watching or listen to it after the fact. All right, we're going to take a quick break and then come back, talk about some bad news on the recruiting front for Georgia. Going to talk about the coaching carousel really heating up over the weekend, and then we will talk a little Georgia basketball. All right, Ben, Georgia wins the football game on Saturday, but a few days later gets some bad news when it comes to a recruit that has been in the middle of a battle that is a part of the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Shadarius Tootle, one-time Auburn commit, had been committed to Georgia, flips back to Auburn, 4-star linebacker from the state of Alabama. What can you tell us on this one and just the latest on where things stand here?
I mean, a true back and forth battle, probably still a true back and forth battle if we're being truthful about it. I mean, this is one where he was committed to Auburn for a long time originally. Once Georgia got involved, Georgia was very much in the mix when he officially visits, ends up flipping from Auburn to Georgia at the end of the summer. If you remember, he actually was the one that kicked off that 10 commitments in 10 days stretch, which doesn't look as great in retrospect since Shadarius Tootle, Chase Calicut, and James Johnson were a part of that. But nonetheless, it was, someone who was taking visits to Auburn at early times throughout the year. In fact, early in the season, like through week 3, I think I would have been on the side of, I don't know if Georgia's going to be holding on to this guy. And then I would say things had changed. Georgia felt a little bit more confident. Auburn wasn't seemingly, saying Shadarius Tootle is the number one guy that Auburn has to flip in this class to feel like it was getting its linebacker that it needed in the class. And so because of that, I didn't think that Georgia was going to be as pressured. We had the conversation on Saturday in the press box when Shadarius was out at the game. You were like, I think that Shadarius is going to flip. And I was like, I've had some talks this week. I just don't think it's going to happen, to the point that I even put a note on Monday. I was like, I think that Georgia should be feeling better about this. And I don't really know what all has changed. I do know that his older brothers in junior college received an offer from Auburn on Tuesday morning. And then by noon Tuesday, he had flipped to Auburn. I don't know if that's a connect the dots that we should pay attention to or not, but I think it's reasonable to think that those things would likely be linked. It's a fascinating situation. I think Georgia was caught off guard a little bit, especially by the timing of it, coming right off of a game when you beat Auburn and your linebacker probably had the best game of anybody who played in that game on Saturday. So it's an interesting timing for that all to play out. Shadarius has been very pro-Georgia. His dad, of course, has been very pro-Georgia. Admittedly, his dad probably has been more pro-Georgia than Shadarius has been through this entire process. That said, we don't know what the future looks like at Auburn. I mean, they've got a big game on Saturday that will likely determine a lot of things about what the future looks like there. And if you're flipping from Georgia to Auburn in part because your older brother, who's a junior college player, got an offer, that gets a lot more complicated if a new staff comes in. And so I don't know what any of that's going to look like. Auburn could win on Saturday against Missouri, and Auburn administration could double down on him being their guy. I have no idea, but how that plays out will probably still dictate whether we're talking about Shadarius Tootle leading up to signing day or not.
Let's just say Shadarius winds up sticking to his commitment, doesn't go to Georgia. Do you see Georgia going after another linebacker? They've got Nick Abrams. Do you see a world where they go and try to get another linebacker in this class?
Well, I had this discussion yesterday because, of course, I had gotten to the point I thought Georgia was going to hold on to Shadarius. We had conversations for a few weeks about Nick Abrams and how worried Georgia should be there. And I think that they got some confirmations there to feel good, and he'll be back for the Ole Miss game as well. And so, I had kind of more or less checked out of that position group because I thought Georgia was just going to ride with those two guys. Now it becomes more interesting. I don't have names right now of who I think they would go forward with. I find it hard to believe Georgia would go with one linebacker in the 26 class, but there's a lot of coaching changes going on across college football. If there was someone in the 2025 recruiting class that Georgia really, really liked at linebacker, and I have a couple in mind, but I'm not going to name them because they're not in the portal and it would be unfair to them. But there are some people in the 2025 recruiting class that Georgia liked at linebacker that ended up at some of these places that have either already lost their coaches or are maybe going to lose their coaches going forward. And if you think that you can get a guy in with 3 years or maybe even 4 years, depending on what his playing time was year one, I think that could be a route that Georgia goes as well. Of course, I'm sure they'll look portal beyond just the 2025 high school class, but I think that the way Georgia likes to develop its linebackers over time, I think they would prefer to take someone that, if you're taking someone in the portal at linebacker, they're probably preferring to take someone that they're developing to play behind Justin Williams and Chris Cole.
I'll just throw out another name. No intel, just something to keep in mind that Isaiah Williams has flipped about 7 different times, and I think he's
that is true.
Is he committed to Florida State right now?
I don't even know where he's committed right now. I think that might be the case. But yeah, it's a good point because he is, when you talk about prototype, what Georgia looks for from its linebackers, he is it. I mean, I think he has the fastest 40 time. I think he's got the longest wingspan, of certain athletic freak traits that he does of the guys that Georgia is recruiting at linebacker. Isaiah Williams certainly fits that. I don't really know. He hasn't been to Georgia in a while now, so I don't know if he has plans to get there this season, but it's an interesting name. And was he on your predicted commit team?
Yeah, well, the first time I think we did a flip, that was my pick.
Yeah, I think your two predicted commit flips were Chadarius Doodle and Isaiah Williams, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
That sounds right, yeah.
There you go. You might be all over the linebacker board, Jordan.
All right, stay glued to Dogs247.com. Ben will have all the recruiting intel, what we learn on the recruiting front when it comes to Tootle and any of the other news in the 26 class and beyond, because all of that is coming to the forefront. Well, guys, coaching carousel check-in. Tootle better hope that his potential future coach isn't here next week, because he very well could be. But busy weekend in college football. 3 different jobs come open. Penn State fires James Franklin. Oregon State makes a move from Trent Bray. And UAB fires Trent Dilfer. We are going to start with Penn State because that's the biggest job on the board and a fascinating decision. I compared this move to, more so where James Franklin was in 2025. I compared it a lot to Mark Richt in the 2010s. I mean, still good, but not quite national championship caliber, not quite being able to win those big games. And now Penn State finds itself where Georgia did late in 2015, trying to find the coach. Georgia worked out for Georgia. They fired Richt and they wind up hiring Kirby Smart, but it's not that easy. It's much easier to make a bad hire than you are to make the hire that gets you over the hump. So I'm going to start with you, Ben. Predict who is the next head coach at Penn State.
It's interesting. I agree with you about James Franklin is sort of like the Mark Richt for Georgia, and Georgia made the right hire. I think that there's a lot of similarities to draw between those two guys and Gus Malzahn at Auburn as well, if we're being honest with you. And they've made the wrong hire probably multiple times. And so you can go the wrong direction just as easily as you can go the right direction. And I think that this is the inflection point for Penn State, and it's probably coming at the most critical time that it could come in college football, because it's a new world. It's a new landscape. There are teams like Indiana and Texas Tech that are establishing themselves as legitimate brands in the new world of college football. And I don't know that that's going to stop being the case as long as they have their head coaches in place. And so you've got to be really careful here. And I think that they made a clear statement. We're going with a new guy, and we got to go get a guy that we know can build a program and establish or, maintain a program. Everyone's saying Matt Rule. I'm going to pick Matt Rule as my choice because I know that he's friends with the AD and he's done it before, and he's played at Penn State. He's, coached in the area in the past. It makes almost too much perfect sense. What's complicating it for me is I think if you are a coach like Matt Rule and you're at a place like Nebraska, and I'm not saying that Nebraska is a better place to be than Penn State 1-for-1, but when you have already had to build something there and establish something, it is hard to do that in today's college football. You have to be sure that you're going to be able to get a roster that first year at Penn State that is going to be able to match the roster that you have at Nebraska. And if you feel sure about that, then I think that Matt Rule takes that job. But it's really hard to be a successful year one coach in college football if you don't have a bunch of guys coming with you. And when you're at a place like Nebraska, it's not going to be the easiest to convince a whole roster of guys to come with you. I mean, it's a big time university with a lot of big time culture. And sure, you might be able to get some guys to go with you. But you look at what Cignetti did going from James Madison to Indiana, which is 2 completely different levels. He takes all these guys at James Madison that are able to step up into a big league that he knows can play and be the perfect bridge guys that he needed for now in year 2. He has a pretty dominant roster on his hands with a quarterback that's going to be playing at the next level. And that's what you need to do in year 1. Can Matt Rule do that in year 1 at Penn State? Maybe, but it's a risk that he'd be having to be willing to take. And Penn State's the one job that he probably would be willing to take it for a close to lateral move. But I don't know.
Yeah, if I'm Penn State, Cignetti is who I really want to go after. I don't really see that happening. The thing, Ben, if I had to guess at some of the odds for this job, I think Matt Rule's probably the betting favorite. The thing that interests me is when you look at the jobs he's taken and the work he's done, it's been rebuilding programs. Take over a Temple program that had been really struggling, turns it into a pretty consistent winner before he leaves. Go to Baylor, one of the worst situations in college football, at least in the 21st century. Did a good job building them into a contender. Leaves for the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers do what the Panthers do, and it doesn't work out. And then he rebuilds Nebraska. So I just don't know if he's the guy that, takes this job and gets you over the hump. I mean, I think if I was a Penn State fan and you said, you either have James Franklin or Matt Rule, I think I'd probably just, keep the money you just spent to fire James Franklin if the option winds up being Matt Rule. But I mean, I think that's the smart choice by you, Ben. I think he's got a really good chance when it comes to getting this job. All right, Kipp. So Matt Rule's off the board. So who is your pick? Who winds up getting the Penn State job?
I mean, that is definitely that is their Kirby Smart, right? Former Penn State player. I think that by basically his agent floating it out there and putting, it's pretty clear that like both sides have a lot of interest. I think that kind of takes Kirk Cignetti off the board. Why would you like be the second choice? Why would you kind of, you're the hottest name, so you should not entertain programs that are like trying to go in another direction. So if it falls through with Matt Rule, I think they probably next in line, Eli Drinkwitz. I think, getting a guy that, he's done a great job at Missouri. What are they like 26-5, 26-6 at Missouri? I mean, that's not something. I mean, once after their first year in the conference, they've been like an afterthought in SEC football for, the better part. Basically the last decade. He had great success at Appalachian State. I just think that, he checks a lot of boxes. He's coaching a former Penn State quarterback. I don't know. I think he's got a lot of goodwill right now. He's impressed a lot of people. I think he makes sense. He should be in the final discussion for, the athletic director, and he should be like, they should continue having conversations with him because if it doesn't work out with Matt Rule, I think, again, you want to make sure that you don't look bad in this coaching search because you made a very, I think, controversial decision to get rid of James Franklin. I think this is like the best news possible for a program like Virginia Tech, where we were talking about like they need to hit a Hail Mary with Shane Beamer. They're not going to hit this Hail Mary. Now, like, pony up the money. Like this could be like a home run for Virginia Tech. You bring in James Franklin there, that changes the whole outlook for that program. So him going to a place where, again, we're getting 9-10 wins a season is outstanding and amazing. They would sign him to an extension immediately if that's the case. And I think Penn State, they have to thread the needle there to make sure they don't fall into where 8-4 is the expectation of that program. So, like I said, I think Eli Drinkwitz should be the next guy in line, and I just don't think that Kirk Cignetti is going to be looking at Penn State right now.
I like the Eli pick quite a bit. I think he would do well in that job, and I think that he could take over and do well. And yeah, if I'm Virginia Tech, you should have already called James Franklin at this point. It seems like to me he would do a really good job. I thought there was a chance that James Franklin could come into play if the Auburn job comes open. I think those back-to-back losses to UCLA and Northwestern, I think that's going to be hard to sell if that Auburn job comes open. All right, I got two options here in my opinion. One's boring, and I'm not going to make this pick, but it's Matt Campbell at Iowa State. I think that he makes a lot of sense with what he's done at Iowa State and Toledo before that. But I'm going to go with a wild card. I'm going to go with Penn State hiring the Vanderbilt head coach for the second straight coaching search. Clark Lee winds up going to Penn State. Had a great run as Notre Dame's defensive coordinator. And whether Clark Lee wants to admit this or not, I mean, I think this is sort of the last dance for Vanderbilt. Diego Pavia, I think, is out of eligibility after this year. They've had a really good season to this point, but I think there is a limit to what you can do at Vanderbilt. It's going to be hard for Clark Lee to leave. He's a Nashville guy. I think he went to Montgomery Bell Academy. I mean, he's back at his alma mater where he played fullback. But if you're going to jump a Penn State job, that's one of the jobs that you have to take. And so I think that it plays out, and given who was already off the board by the time I picked, I say Clark Lee winds up taking the job. Ben, what you got?
I love that pick for starters. I think that we talked about it, like there's very few jobs out there that I think Clark Lee would leave Vanderbilt for. I think Penn State might be in the conversation for one of them. So I really, really like that pick. One, I wanted to float out there as well, Brian Hartline. And then, who else? I had another one. Oh, you had me thinking about it. Guys that are not in jobs that you would think would be looking for jobs necessarily, but they kind of might be. Kipp, I don't know if we're on the same page here. We may or may not be, but one that comes to mind, Brian Kelly. Does Brian Kelly want to get out of LSU at some point? And that's a job that might be worth doing it for?
Well, whenever you said you did want to go boring, I thought Urban Meyer was going to be who you said. I mean, if you want to just light the world on fire, and I mean, again, if you're going to swing big and if you miss out, let's say Kurt already said no and it falls through in that rule, and you're just like, man, we got to make a splash here. I just think, again, that's if he wants to get back into coaching, I think that is your like out of left field. It could be amazing, could be really, really bad, but at least we could say we took a shot at taking the next step of the program. I mean, Urban Meyer would be a guy that I would at least vet. And maybe if we see just a soft, if they float him out there and just see how everyone reacts, because we've seen that a lot in the last couple of years, that would not shock me at all.
Yeah, I think the Brian Hartline one is really good. Ben, I wonder if Penn State would spend all that money and then hire a first-time head coach.
I mean, that's the thing that I was talking about. It's like, all right, you look at all these best programs, like Georgia had a first-time head coach. Ohio State has a first-time head coach. Notre Dame has a first-time head coach. When Clemson was winning, they have a first-time head coach. It's like the guy who turns out to be the guy is not always like this predictable. Like I was thinking about it historically. Has there ever been in like the last 20 years, 25 years, let's say, has there been anyone other than Nick Saban that was the clear, this is the guy, go hire this guy, that was like obvious he's been a head coach somewhere and it turned out to just be wildly successful? Now, part of the reason why that hasn't happened is because Nick Saban was the only person who was successful consistently for like 20 years. So that's part of the reason why it was that way. But
in that case, they should hire Will Stein, bringing the Oregon offensive coordinator.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's someone like that out there that like we're not talking about, that if you're Penn State is probably the right guy. The Heartline thing almost is like much of like a take a shot at Ohio State as well. Like you're not just helping your program, maybe taking a shot, hoping that you have this guy that works out as a first-time head coach, but you're also weakening one of the best aspects of Ohio State.
No, I think it's going to be a search worth following, and it's going to be something that we all keep an eye on, because it's going to have dominoes depending on who takes that job and what follows. All right, we'll try to go quicker on these other two jobs, which I think is only natural given the jobs. Oregon State, Trent Bray gets fired. 2-year run where it just was not working. 5-14 overall, 0-7 this year. This is a very hard job. This is one of the toughest jobs in college football among the Power Four. And I guess you really can't consider Oregon State part of the Power Four anymore because of the way the Pac-12 dissolved. It was a really difficult job even when the Pac-12 was around. I'll give both of you guys a few minutes to kind of come up with your name. And I'm going to give one off the wall that, I see this as being a very difficult job to fill. This is the kind of job that like an FCS head coach is going to take, or my pick, a former head coach who wants to get back in the game. Brian Harsin
That's what I was gonna do.
will be the next head coach at Oregon State. He's at Cal right now, doing a really good job. They've got a really talented young quarterback. Cal as a whole has been kind of hit and miss, but I think Brian Harsin really wants a chance to be a head coach again. He's gotten a few interviews, gotten some attention the last few years, but I think he realizes his chances to be a head coach are, drawing slimmer and slimmer. And he's an Idaho guy, so getting back to the Pacific Northwest, I'm going to say Brian Harsin is the next head coach at Oregon State. Kip, who you got for this job?
I think if they're not bringing someone up from a lower division, a head coach, then you just got to take the best coordinator you can find that may have ties to the area. So yeah, that narrows it down to me. Like a couple of guys that we know of, I would say Ryan Grubb would make sense. Just a guy that's got Pacific Northwest, West Coast ties, being up there, or sticking with Missouri. I'll go Kirby Moore, a guy who played at Boise State. He's from Washington. So again, similar Pacific Northwest ties. I think either of those would make sense. I mean, I don't know how those guys are going to be able to build out their staff, but it gives, those are gettable guys, I think, that are coordinators at major programs right now.
Ben, who do you got for this job since I stole yours?
Well, you actually ended up making me stumble upon somebody else that I hadn't considered, but he's on the Cal staff as an offensive analyst. He's been there for 5 years. Also was a former head coach, Nick Rolovich, and it was an ugly ending at Washington State. I guess you could consider Washington State and Oregon State rivals at this point. I don't know what kind of coach Oregon State is able to hire. I went and saw our shout out to our Oregon State 24/7 site. I think Beaver Blitz, they had put out a list, and I saw that New Mexico head coach Jason Eck, who's having a pretty good year. He's coached at Idaho for different stints during his career, so he's familiar with the area as an interesting one. But I'm going to go with Nick Rolovich just because I love the drama of do Oregon State and Washington State still play every year?
I think they have, because they've kind of had an alliance because they were basically the last two standing.
So yeah, I like Rolovich to try and get back into coaching to try and just beat Washington State every year.
I want to say this because I do think this is going to become relevant. This could be something that comes up next week. Jason Eck, former Wisconsin offensive lineman, and I think that Wisconsin job is about to come open. I don't know that Jason Eck gets it because there's a few other names, but he is going to be in the mix when that Wisconsin job comes open.
Yeah, for sure. New Mexico pretty good this year, though. I mean, they lost early to Michigan and Oklahoma pretty respectably. No.
Yeah.
Michigan pretty respectably, I guess it was.
Yeah, and he won 10 games at Idaho last year. All right, the last job, UAB. Trent Dilfer gets fired. Should have been fired last season. I guess that the buyout was just too much. Just an utter disaster. UAB totally mishandled hiring him, and he did an awful job at UAB. So a decent AAC job coming open. I'll start with you, Ben. Who is your pick to be the next head coach?
I wish you hadn't started with me. I had no thoughts on it whatsoever.
Would you like me to save you?
Yeah, save me for a second.
So I'm going to say that they correct a wrong. And what I mean by that is in 22, when Bill Clark stepped down due to health concerns, they had Bryant Vincent. He was the interim head coach and did a really good job in Bill Clark's place. He wanted the full-time job. They decided to go with the flashy hire. He's been at UL Monroe last few years and done a pretty good job. I don't know that their record's all that good this year, but a lot of experience coaching high school football in the state of Alabama. My pick is Bryant Vincent, jumps from UL Monroe, comes back to UAB, maybe has a happy ending after they butchered it the first time. Kip, what do you got for UAB?
I think that you can bring in a guy like Neil Brown, who's just an assistant at Texas, but did really good job at Troy. I mean, they were he back-to-back 10-win seasons there. So you have that connection where you can bring a guy in that's had success in the area and didn't work out at West Virginia. that's a hire that would make a lot of sense to me. What I wish would happen, I don't know if he cares. I'd have to text him and ask him if he wants to get back into it. But bring Ed Ogeron back into the college football world. I mean, that would be something where that would just make me happy just to see him out there. I know he's living his best life right now, but college football is a lot more fun when Ed Ogeron is involved with it. So that's kind of the wild card. But I think Neil Brown makes a lot of sense as just a guy that's still, I mean, mid 40s, still a young head coach and had success in the area. I think he's a gettable guy for them.
I like that pick a lot with Neil Brown, and I do think it's worth pointing out because you mentioned Ed Orgeron. Neil Brown beat Ed Orgeron, if you remember Troy beating LSU. So that's worth shouting out. Ben, what do you got?
Can y'all educate me on how good of a job UAB is?
It's a decent AAC job. I think more than likely this falls into this is a young assistant getting an opportunity, and either that or a former head coach getting back in the game. I think Neil Brown's a great example. I'll throw out a name. You don't have to pick this guy, Ben, but I am interested to see if Glenn Schumann gets some run
Well,
for
I was
this
going to say,
job.
is this a job Todd Hartley would take?
I think so, because there's another job too. I think Georgia Southern may come open this year, and that's a job specifically that I think Todd Hartley could get in the mix for. But I'd say it's on the same level. I don't think if you picked Todd Hartley for UAB that's like there's no way that's going to happen.
Well, I was thinking, like, I know he had, I think it was Southern Miss was a job that he had at least like flirted around with. I think Marshall might have been one as well. Like UAB feels in that realm to me, and it just because of the recruiting. I mean, he's Northwest Georgia. Like that's a great recruiting territory for him at UAB. So I would think that would make a lot of sense if Todd Hartley were to do it. So I guess that'll be my pick. I was also looking at, if they wanted to go the FCS ranks, a guy that's been around for a long time, older guy, but established a program. Ty Simpson's dad, Jason Simpson at UT Martin. You could get him over there. You could sell it as, hey, he's an older guy. It's slightly unconventional hire a little bit going from the FCS ranks, but it's Ty Simpson's dad. You guys can't be upset about that. You're in Birmingham.
A guy that's been crushing it recently is Mike Jacobs at Mercer too. I think he's 16-4 there. He was like 32-9 at Lenore Ryan. I think that's the guy that continues at each level. He's also mid-40s. So I think if you wanted that up-and-comer, I think Mike Jacobs is the guy that's probably – you mentioned Georgia Southern being a job that could open up. I think he's a guy that should be in the mix for both those jobs.
Shout out to the Mercer Bears. All right, Georgia men's basketball minute. Really neat on Tuesday, SEC tip-off, the first of 2 days where the SEC men's and women's basketball coaches and a couple players from each team went to Birmingham to get ready for the start of the season. Had a chance to talk to Mike White, Blue Kane, Dylan James. Got some really good intel. Wrote a notebook on Tuesday. I hope you guys will check that out. But then there's a lot of excitement about this Georgia team. I think that they look at where they are. They've got to replace their top two scorers from last year, but they like what they've added. Mike has been really impressed with the way this team has shot the ball in practice. Their passing ability, turnovers and assist to turnover ratio was a big issue last year, but seems to like what he's seen there. And I'll add something I included in the notebook. I thought it was really interesting. So on Monday, it's announced Georgia is projected to finish 14th out of 16 teams. That's from the people who voted for SEC, the tip-off, the folks that voted there. Mike said that on Monday they had a meeting with the team, and he said, we were talking about where we were projected to finish. We talked about Ken Palm. We talked about Torvik. We talked about all these different statistics, the predictions, who we're supposed to beat, who we're not supposed to beat. He said, did all that, and then I asked the team, can you control any of that? So what do we need to focus on? So I thought that was really interesting. Mike addressing what the outside expectations are and that this team can't control that at all. I'll mention too, Wednesday night, as we're recording this, they, later today, they are going to scrimmage Georgia State. They're going to have an exhibition down in Atlanta. Not going to have a chance to be at that one, but that's going to be a nice test before they have another exhibition. I believe that's October 26th at home against Troy. We'll be there for that one. Really a good opportunity to get this team ready. A couple of Sun Belt teams and some familiar faces, guys, on that Georgia State staff with Jonas Hayes and Jarvis Hayes. All right, well, we will get ready to wrap up this episode. I appreciate Kipp and Ben for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Be sure to go to Dogs 24/7, subscribe. We are in the middle of football season. As I just mentioned, basketball season is, I guess, about 3 weeks away at this point. So we will have that covered. Before you know it, baseball will be rolling. Olivia Sayer will have that for us, help us with Bulldogs coverage on the diamond. And be sure to subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube, Dogs 24/7, TikTok. A lot of good content there. And again, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, we'll have Neil McCready on from Rebels 24/7. We will deep dive this Ole Miss team, get a good feel for the Rebels before what I think will be a very entertaining game on Saturday afternoon. So we'll end the episode right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody. Wait a minute. Whoa, we can't end the episode right there. The Falcons. I almost forgot, Kipp. 24-14. I mean, I think you might have left the podcast if I didn't bring this up. I'm just going to let you talk about it. The Falcons on Monday night, they got it done.
I mean, I'm still in shock. I think we all are at what we watched in that football game. The start to that game, you just at halftime, when London did not get in the end zone, the scenario started unfolding of whether you're like, this game's over. Like that was a Falcons moment to where we didn't kick the field goal. We didn't get in the end zone. And yet the defense just continued to come out there. And I mean, I think it's refreshing to see the defense get consistent pressure the way the Falcons defense did. And these are young players making plays, but my goodness, man, Bijan Robinson, I remember when that pick was made, a lot of deleted tweets and a lot of like our search function that we have on the Junkyard now, the timing of that, I think we might be able to find some receipts on a lot of opinions, but the best non-quarterback in the NFL plays for the Falcons. And I think the start he's had, the yards from scrimmage, he is on a historic run, and crown him. And it still makes that 30-0 loss to the Panthers sting even worse, knowing that they can do this. But you know what? Let's not think about that. Let's move forward, and let's continue blitzing like they blitzed Josh Allen. I mean, they took down the league in MVP. It's just an incredible thought. I didn't realize we would have multiple moments like this in the same season. So, rise up.
The bar has been pretty low for the Falcons the last few years, but, I mean, I was thrilled. And Bijan's 81-yard touchdown run was fantastic. I think Jeff Ulbricht's doing a fantastic job as defensive coordinator. And, that 30-0 game was something, but the fact that they bounced back, I'm pretty pleased. Ben, any thoughts on the Dirty Birds?
I think that, as weird as it is to say, I think the 30-0 game will probably be the more fluky game of the season than the Bills game. I think that what we've seen in the two primetime games, winning by multiple scores in two primetime games, isn't hard to do, and they're going to have a few more opportunities to do it. To Kipp's point, the fact that the best non-quarterback in the NFL plays for the Falcons, I think the best football player in the world right now is Bijan Robinson. I know that I'm saying that with very biased eyes, but that's how I feel about Bijan Robinson. He makes football at the highest level of the sport look so easy. It is ridiculous watching him play. The defense, I mean, I think it's first in the league in yards per game allowed. I think offensively it's second in the league in yards per game, and I think it's first run in the football. So, this is a team that just plays good, sound football consistently. And the Panthers game is frustrating, but it's a very much like when we look back on it, it's going to look a lot like Alabama, Florida State. We're just going to say, how the heck did that happen?
Rose-colored glasses to look at the Falcons is perfectly fine. And two, shout out whoever convinced Zach Robinson to walk down to the sideline and start coaching from down there. And, it's funny. We were like begging to give him away. He's going to right the ship, and then he is going to take that Oklahoma State job like we all tried to pressure him into doing. right, we'll just end it right there. I've already done our goodbyes. Shout out to the Falcons. They actually made us happy for a nice change. Hopefully they'll keep that up. And until next time, take care, everybody.